Yeah, so 9-3. Your thoughts about is that a successful season? I would think so.
Look, coming into this year, and so they opened with BYU, then played Chattanooga. LSU, the game that was affected by the hurricane was the BYU game that moved from Houston to New Orleans, but did get played. So LSU will have played a full 12-game schedule. They had the loss to Troy. If they finish 9-3, look, I'd lay out a scenario where you can say, coming into this year, I thought 9-3 was this team's ceiling, or was probably more realistic. But I would not have predicted that 9-3, including the loss to Troy. I would have thought LSU would have lost to either Auburn or Alabama, Auburn or Florida, and the loss to Alabama, and then found a way to lose somewhere along the way to one of the Mississippi schools, and they did lose to Mississippi State. So if you kind of just roll back the tape, provided they do finish 9-3, and if you're an optimist, you look and say, okay, well, the loss to Troy is something that's an outlier. You are a breath away from being 10-2, and then you're markedly better than you played against Mississippi State. And that's a game where you were a road favorite, probably should have won if you'd actually showed up. So you can say, man, this team had a legitimate chance to go 11-1 in a watered down SEC. But my point is, I think Ed Orgeron can go to his team and say, guys, look, if you showed up in the first month, you're sitting here at 11-1. You're not that far off from being a contender again. So now they got to take care of business throughout the stretch in November. But how this 9-3 came to pass with some nice road wins in conference and what I think is going to be massive turnover with head coaches in the league, LSU could position itself next year to maybe make a run. But as far as a debut season for Ed Orgeron, if they finish 9-3, the story will be stumbling out the gate, the embarrassing losses to State and Troy, but equally as impressive would be their ability to rebound, to rally, and finish strong, as it looks like they will.
Matt, in this first unveiling of the college football playoff rankings, and then just looking at the landscape of the 5 conferences and Notre Dame, what comes to mind for you that's not obvious on the surface in regards to a team that you really like that's not getting as much play, maybe somebody that's overrated, maybe it's the Georgia-Alabama matchup that appears to be something that could get, for the first time, 2 teams into this 4-team race from one league. What catches your eye? What do you think's extremely interesting here?
I think Clemson being in with the loss to Syracuse, that's in their top 4. But the other thing, Mark, is, man, if we go back to the first year of the playoff, and you remember the first ever playoff rankings that came out, there were 3 teams from the SEC West. Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Auburn were all in the top 4. And, man, everybody, their hair was on fire, right? I mean, all of college football was just incensed that this one division has 3 of the 4 teams, and how can that be? And none of them made the playoff. So it's like, I don't really care. I mean, I'll just be candid. I don't care about these rankings right now. It's an opportunity for ESPN to fill a television window and for the playoff to generate conversation about its event. I get it. I think it's very smart. But truthfully, it means absolutely nothing right now with 5 weeks of football to play. So, I mean, and you could say, well, the teams that are in, what if they went out? This was TCU in year 1. And then in the last week, because Baylor had beaten them head-to-head, they said, you know what, let's take you out and put Ohio State in. So I think the committee over the years has proven they'll do anything to fit whatever narrative they need, and these rankings this week just don't matter. They just don't.
They don't matter. And I think I saw the statistic that if you take the first 3 years and the first unveiling, so you've got 12 teams, only 5 made the playoff of the 12 slots. But you do have some scenarios in which, and we know that there are going to be upsets, and we can't find those upsets. They always surprise us. Therefore, they are just that, upsets. But Clemson runs the table, Ohio State. Let's say the expected happens. Notre Dame, the 2 things that make this a difficult scenario potentially for the playoff committee is obviously the Alabama-Georgia situation, that they are so much better than their divisions that they are huge favorites to go unscathed. Georgia steps up, plays a tough championship game, whether win or lose. They lose 31-28. They look like a viable option, a team that needs to be in the top 4. And Notre Dame wins out. they've cleared their toughest hurdles. They do have Stanford and Miami, but Notre Dame will be a distinct favorite in those games, not a huge favorite. It is playing toward a difficult decision.
I think if Notre Dame wins out and their only loss is a 1-point loss to Georgia, they're in. I think the bigger question is going to be, what do you do potentially with a Big 12 or an ACC champion? Who's going to fill that? Because the assumption is, if both Bama and Georgia make it and Notre Dame makes it, man, you're going to have 2 conference champions that are sitting on the outside going, hey, man. Or I'm sorry, 3 Power 5 conference champions. So my assumption would be the Big 10 champion makes it, because that looks like the strongest league. And you have a school like Ohio State maybe best positioned if they run the table to get in. And that would probably be the best team to get in. But what if Clemson runs the table? Are they out? They're in right now. Are they then out? So it's why, man, you got 5 weeks to go. There's so many games to play. These things tend to sort themselves out in time.
Yeah, they do to a certain extent, but I want to debunk the system, so I would like to see chaos and power brokers left out. It's one thing when TCU and Baylor get trumped by Ohio State. Sure, there's a bit of a ruckus, but nobody goes crazy about it, especially when the Buckeyes go and win the national championship. But if it's Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Clemson you're looking at for one spot, and 2 of those 3 get left out, then there might be some push to get this thing to 8 teams.
Well, it's not going to go to 8 until this TV contract is up, which is what, 2024 or 20
like that.
Yeah, so it's a ways to go before you even consider expanding the playoff. So look, we dealt with the BCS for a lot of years and somehow managed to make it through and still love college football. I think we'll deal with these 4 until we ultimately get to 8. And if they find a way to double their television contract, then they'll probably go to 8.
Always a good discussion with Matt Moscona. You can join him on ESPN Radio, Baton Rouge and New Orleans. His show is After Further Review. Matt, always enjoy the insight. LSU, Alabama coming up. Hopefully it's a good one.
Here's hoping, man. I'm excited to see it, man. For the good of college football, an LSU win would be fantastic to see somebody challenge Alabama.